Okay, sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, ich freue mich, Sie und die virtuellen Besucher, das wird live oder übertragen auf Swissbau TV, zu diesem Anlass begrüßen zu dürfen. Mein Name ist Christian Blaser, ich bin Präsident der Stiftung Architekturdialoge Basel und verantwortlich für diesen Anlass. Wir in den Architekturdialogen Basel engagieren uns in 4 Gefäßen, um die Architektur einem breiten Publikum zu eröffnen. Die Architekturvorträge wie heute, Architektur und, die Journée d'Architektur sowie einer Veranstaltungsagenda, wo alles unserer Region zu finden ist. Unsere Stiftung ist eine Non-Profit-Organisation und wird von 7 Kollegen geführt und betrieben. Die Kosten oder der Beitrag zu unserer Stiftung wird seit Jahren großzügig von der hier in Basel domizilierten Firma Regent Lighting gesponsert. Dafür herzlichen Dank. Wir freuen uns seit langen und vielen Jahren immer wieder, dass unsere großen Vortragsanlässe in diesem Rahmen an der Swissbau stattfinden können. Die heutigen Vorträge werden großzügig unterstützt von Forster, wunderschöne Schweizer Stahlküchen, sowie der HRS Real Estate, die das Gebäude gebaut haben. Herzlichen Dank den Sponsoren Swissbau, Forster und HRS. And now I turn to English, dear audience. When I heard about the new Institute of Technology in Architecture, ITA, at the ETH Zurich, I immediately thought of picking up this theme of design and the reality of construction for today's lecture series. Where else can than on a building fair like this come architects, planners and contractors all together? We will hear 3 different practicing architects in a keynote lecture, but start now with an introduction of the new institute and the relation between architecture and technology by Professor Dr. Ludger Hovestad. Ludger Hovestad is Professor for Computer-Aided Design, Architectural Design at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, ETH in Zurich. His approach is a very broad one, to look for new relationships between architecture and IT, aiming a global perspective that connects to different fields such as politics, demographics and technology. He is also inventor and founder of several spin-off companies in the fields of smart building technology and digital design and fabrication. So please welcome Ludger Hovestad for opening this conference. Thank you very much.
Yeah, good morning. It's a pleasure for me to introduce you to my special view to our Institute of Technology and Architecture in Zurich at the ETH. My subject is computer science, so my background is architecture. I made my PhD with Fritz Haller, who is known from the USM Haller furniture. So I'm very functionalistic. It's a kind of mannerism in functionalism. This is my background. The ITA is the Department of Architecture in Zurich at the ETH. Is about 32, 36 different professorships, which are extremely independent. So it's a bunch of professors with certain specialties. Half of them operate design studios in very specific directions. The other half is in principle split into 2 different main institutes. One is history and theory in architecture, so this is the humanistic view, and the other is in theory in architecture. So in technology and architecture. So we are 7 to 8 colleagues covering the whole range of different disciplines in technology in architecture. My perspective is computer science, and my background and my experience is I started in 2000, and I was something like a scout for new technologies for architecture. And the very interesting phenomena, it was successful until 2010. And with the dominance of social media, somehow the situation shifted very much. And this is what I want to show you in a few essays about technology in architecture. The interesting thing is that, especially with social media, currently everybody is using computing. It's very proud to make the first steps, and somehow still imitating the old-fashioned habit in a much faster way. So on the one hand, people are extremely fast in doing things. On the other hand, they are a little afraid that it's too accelerating, and they want to stop that. The perspective, what we are doing now is that we say there is no solution for that. On the one hand, you're suffering of speed. On the other hand, you are just operating in an enormous speed. The way out is what we call abstraction. I want to show you what the actual situation is with these 3 episodes. And I think we are at a point to reinvent a new kind of attitude towards architecture because of this genericness, I would say, of technology. So what you can, for example, buy, and this is what is a result of the research of the last 20, 30 years, is it's, for example, called a city engine. City engine is, you can buy it with, this is a spin-off of ETH. You can buy it with $129, and this means build your own million city with a few mouse clicks. So 129, and it's like that. So then you say, as architect, what is this? Our research, for example, is you can ask 1 million people for their favorite places to live, where they want to live, which should be their neighbor, what is with the kids, with the parks, and so on, which kind of city life they want to get established. We shake these millions and we get a layout for that. And everybody, to a degree of 85, 87, whatever percent, much more than they could do by hand, is happy for this moment. The question then is, it's a horrible story for architects. And it's the same with optimization. Therefore, it's a strange concept of fighting, for example, Nachhaltigkeit, because optimization is like that. Optimization, Nachhaltigkeit is for the machines. It's like that. Everybody can do that. It's cheap, it's fast, and it's exactly what architecture can't be. Now, you might have heard, we have this kind of fancy or strange experience with Singapore. So we run a lab there with 100 researchers for 5 years, financed by Singaporean government. And we say that and say, we want to research what architecture can be next if we have this generic kind of technology. And they say, why? It's great if it's like that. So there's a strange attitude, and you can't do things in Singapore. That's absolutely amazing. So the astonishing thing, and this is a paradox, I would say, is that with these kind of technologies, which is just there, it's cheap, it's fast, it's easy to use, you can't improve architecture by doing better. Because the doing better is to the machines. So what we observe, I would say, this is what Ramkolas addresses as the generic city or junk space. So what we have is, we have a huge amount of sociologists looking for all these parameters and trying to be nice to people, optimize that. It's like that. And I would say it's a socio-sprawl. The same with design and with architecture. You can have an enormous, and you see that in Singapore, everything is designed somehow. And I would say it's a design or it's an architectural flood. And this is the character of a generic city or of junk space. And the paradox of that is you can't improve by doing better. So the question then is, what is architecture? Next essay. The fantastic of technology is, and this is all over the 20th century, is that it's losing its structure. So the interesting thing is that it nearly can do anything. So in the 19th century, you had these huge lifts, you had these subways, these big things, you started with big ventilations and so on. And all this over the last, especially over the last 50, 60 years, somehow vanished. Currently, it's just printing. You have these kind of screens. There's no structure. You have cables. Even the cables get substituted by wireless. You can do anything, what you want. You don't need to connect things by wires, by ducts, by pipes, and so on. It's wireless, if you even want to get that. Some electricity cable, that's it. So technology loses systematically its structural impact to architecture. So architects can't trust on structure. So they have to reinvent themselves. Architecture has to emancipate or to cultivate the generic technology. These kind of technologies can do anything. They can display any picture. They can generate any sound. They can display or generate any acoustics, whatever you want. It's just, so it's no structural impact in perspective. So architecture, again, has to invent itself. So it's not the question to optimize that. Next story is about energy. So my strong belief is that, especially with photovoltaics, with its printing technology, as these screens, as these chips on computers, and so on. So you have patterns of quantum mechanical elements. You imprint that, and just because you disturb, or people say, engineers say, you dope the matter. It's a doping of matter in a certain pattern. It's printing, like we printed books in former times. Put it to the sun and you get energy. So you don't use any resources. Just by writing little poems, putting them to sun, you get energy. And the interesting thing is, by calculation, you have 10,000 times more than Mother Nature is giving us. All the greenery all around is capturing energy from the sun. If there's this factor 1 per year, our poems with actual technology is factor 10,000. So we have 10,000 artificial natures, which is clean, which is in contract to the actual nature, which can afford recycling of material and so on. But for architecture, it's very important. Energy is out of the game of architecture. For example, my strong belief, you can calculate that for 2 or 3 years now, it's like that if you want to renovate a building in Switzerland to make it energy efficient or CO2 free, it's cheaper to invest in solar trackers in Spain than to renovate in Switzerland. And you have the same ecological balance. That's amazing. So therefore, again, even energy or sustainability or whatever you want has no structural impact to the new upcoming architecture. So these are the three episodes. You can take many more and go more in depth in these things. So my message is, technology drives generic. It's a very long drive over the last 100, 120 years. Currently, we are a little afraid of the speed. We are a little sarcastic, like Kohlhaas, about the genericness of that. We're stuck in this paradox in every aspect. But the good message is, by understanding that, we are able to cultivate that and create a new kind of architecture. So that's my short talk. Thank you.
Danke, danke, danke. Thank you, Ludger Hovestad, for your words. To begin, I think now it's very interesting. We hear maybe 3 different attitudes to architecture. That's the goal of today. And we start the keynote lecture with Bijoy Jain. He is born in 65, and he is a contemporary Indian architect. He received his Masters of Architecture from Washington University in St. Louis, and then he worked 6 years for Richard Meyer's office in London and LA. He returned then to India in '95 and founded his own studio, Studio Mumbai Architects. Studio Mumbai is a human infrastructure of skilled craftsmen and architects who design and build the work directly on site. The essence of his work, I think, lies in the relationship between the land, the human working condition, building, and architecture. His buildings emerge through a process of direct sharing of knowledge of architects and artisans and the construction itself. For us here in Europe, this has become a very unusual practice, and we are keen to hear or to get to know more about his relation to practice of the architecture and the reality of construction. Please welcome Bijoy Jain from Studio Mumbai. Thanks. Okay.
Thank you, Christian, for the introduction. I just want to make one quick correction. I'm Indian by birth, so I'm not a contemporary Indian architect. I'm an architect living in a contemporary culture, and I'm Indian by birth. So I just wanted to clarify that aspect. What I want to present really is not so much about low technology or low tech, high tech, or any kind of tech. And this is more my own personal attitude towards what we do. I just happen to be in the practice of architecture. It could possibly be in mathematics, music, literature, economics, so on and so forth. But the main basis of this entire search or manifesto, if you want to say, it really wasn't an agenda that was planned, but it's based on this very fundamental idea, I think, which is common to all of us, and that is self-reliance. Again, importantly, it doesn't place its precedence on a particular method, in terms of tradition. So I'm not nostalgic about tradition, or necessarily about the methods that we deploy today, whether it's digital machinery. So for me, the interest actually lies in the possibility of bringing all of these together in a sort of constructive, creative dialogue. And so the whole action for me really is, how do we remain in a dialogue to be creative and in that process constructive? Very quickly, this is a slide I just want to in some way demonstrate this idea of, I guess, the push and pull of where we are today as maybe a local or a globalized culture. But again, that's not necessarily important. For me, the interest lies in how do we connect, past, present, future, more in terms of a sense of time, and how do we, in that process, displace time. And in doing that, I think we then remain more in the now. I don't want to say present, but more in the now. So anyway, this first slide, what I want to show, and I'm going to use basically the Indian landscape as a backdrop to maybe postulate this idea of a methodology. But anyway, so the first slide here to the left, on the screen, and that's what I like. Again, very quickly, India's a country of 1,200,000,000 people. We've just got numbers. There's a mass density, thickness, just in the sheer population. More than half the landscape, or the built landscape, so let's take 500 million people, build their own buildings, or the Indian landscape is built outside the framework of what you and I do as architecture. So there's a whole, I wouldn't say informal, it's a very organized construction industry, but it's purely based on the idea of self-reliance. So here, anyway, there's a slide. It shows this ramp and a staircase, and what's important or what's interesting is this, in the last 20 years, there's been a sort of, I would say, an economic shift, not so much a cultural shift. So there's this economic juggernaut that has now come into the country, maybe 25 years. And our interest lies in their potential overlap. It's sort of moving away and coming together, moving away. It's more like an ebb and flow of like the sea. And again, importantly, we have this idea of, two cultures. Just something for you to think about, because I think today, as a globalized world, we all pretty much live in Greenwich Mean Time. Our entire basis of how we move, how we eat, what we do, how we conduct ourselves is based on Greenwich Mean Time. And again, how did Greenwich Mean Time come about? It was more in the way, I think, maybe in the 14th, 15th century when the seas had to be controlled, by the British. It was a way to sort of formalize and make a sort of even platform in the way that they could negotiate more in terms of being able to, in some way, conquer the world. But if I go back, interestingly, and I think this is for all of us, no matter what part of the world we all come from a certain basis of time, and that's the relationship between the sun and the moon, and I call it moon time. And I think somewhere that's the important part of where the cultivation of culture exists, and in the process of in this idea of the cultivation of culture, I think architecture has evolved from that idea. So the entire basis of construct, or the idea of construction, comes from this idea of cultivation. But for me, importantly, it's the interest in the overlap of Greenwich Mean Time and the sun and the moon. And is there potential where they can actually meet, and what can then come from that? And I think it's this constant negotiation of where one is not necessarily stronger than the other, but they actually use each other in a way that's constructive, because some way we can't turn the clock back. But more importantly, we have the potential to absorb these things and make them as one. So again, the idea that they're not in conflict, they're not necessarily in conflict, but more as means to continue this idea of cultivation of culture. And in that, by default, architecture's representation of that. And that's my understanding of what it means to build. So again, sorry, this is the third time, and I'm going to try and get to this slide. And so what you see is a ramp and a staircase, and you can see that they've come together. The ramp came in at some point later because a motorcycle was brought in by this family, and the motorcycle takes the central space of the living room because there's a pride position. And how it's been overlapped. But when you see the object itself, or when you see, that physical manifestation, you don't quite know which one came first, and which one is more important than the other. But it's this idea of inclusiveness that exists in both of them. The image to the right is taken. It's a rock in the southern part of India. I just took the picture just purely from its sculptural quality, these sort of marks that were made into this rock, and much later that I found out actually what they were designed for. And so this is how an entire kingdom, an entire dynasty was built, not in a very long period of time, maybe 30 or 40 years that it took in the 16th century. But again, this is how granite was split. The holes were made, wooden pegs were taken in, driven in, water was put over these wooden pegs, the wood expanded, and that's what split the rock. Very simple device. So this entire kingdom, basically, or this entire city, doors, openings, everything is constructed of one single material, and that's granite. Everything, all the moving parts too. And for me, the interest is that one can still, I believe, still construct this way. It's still available to us. But anyway, that's a discussion to be had maybe at another point. I'm going to quickly go through the slides that I have. Again, just this idea of the overlap. I call the gentleman on the left, or rather to my to my left, yes. Pocket Man, I was exchanging money because these incredible implements, these are farming implements, fairly fundamental, evolved over a period of time, a perfect representation of the hand, the idea of the tool, the hand, the body, the mind, and this is an implement that is an extension of the hand. So anyway, it was just more a sense of archiving this, and so I was exchanging money with him, and I asked him, how come you're the only one wearing this T-shirt? And he says, well, I get it for free. Can't argue. It's in the very hot region of the country. It's cotton. His colleague or his uncle, who's on the right of me, in this white linen shirt. And I'm showing this because of this idea of a lack of judgment or prejudice in that negotiation, where it's not that he's backing up from this entire industry, this Coca-Cola, plywood, glass, all this stuff that's sort of an onslaught. But anyway, so they get these T-shirts for free because that's advertising. And so he says, I get it for free. I can't argue with him on that either. And anyway, so I hand him the money, and the next thing I know, he sort of dips into his T-shirt, and there's this pocket. Again, it's important to observe that he still wears a linen sort of cloth that's wrapped around, so it really doesn't have any pockets. And that's why they rely on the pockets that are on the shirt. So I said, how did you do that? And he says, it's very simple. I took it home. My wife cut it up, Lucio Fontana cut, and she stitched this beautiful satin pocket. Again, the reason I say this, or I show this particular slide, is more from the lack of prejudice, where both these things are enabled. The advertising still remains intact, and it's this very minimal cut that enables a sort of space to be opened up. In a sense, what appeared to be a closed space is now an open space, and there's a discussion that actually occurs. So I'm just saying this is the manifestation. I'm calling that design, that's the motivation. That where does design occur from? It's more this motivation or this negotiation of the possibility of these two conditions rather than one or the other. Anyway, that's our studio workshop. We make, basically it's more like a laboratory. Again, it's not handwork in the sense, but it's more a mind, body, and hand. It's not one, it's all three together. And our interest basically fundamentally lies in the most minimum gestures that one makes. So you actually spend the time, you take the time. And I don't mean in a sense of slowing time down. You can actually work at great agility. If you think about martial arts or a specific dance form, that it's all about control, between control and lack of control. So it's all about actually embedded in ourselves, rather, in our body, where the potential of being optimum lies, not so much that is external. And once we understand this relationship, we can then have one that is an external one. So the idea of inside, outside, or internal, external can start basically resonating between each other. But anyway, that's a quick shot of the workshop. These are drawings by hand, this great idea of mimicking. So we have a human rapid prototyping system. We can take 3D printers on. And it's more from a point of view that, you take electricity for granted. I can't, we can't. Sometimes we get electricity for 8 hours a day, and what do you do for the rest of the 8 hours? So we still have to continue to create, still have to be in the practice. And so for me, the interest lies that we're making some very certain fundamental assumptions, that we're living in a world where certain criteria, like we're talking about, just power supply, but there's a fair part of the world that cannot or still doesn't exist in that mode. So it's not about making a judgment. So I'm saying that given both these conditions, how do you negotiate? How do you remain open, and how can one move between one and the other? But anyway, so these are just quick representations, or I'm calling instruments of representation as modes of communication, really, for construction. Models, that's a full-scale cross-section, this image on the left to my right. I'm getting confused between the left and right. That's what we have in India. That if some of you visited, you'll ask a question and you'll get this sort of yes and no, and you ask that, is it a yes? And you'll again get this nod. It's this sort of, you don't quite know between the yes and the no. And I like that. I like this sense of ambiguity of what's between the yes and the no. And it's all placed really in the gestures. So there's a sort of, you have to be engaged in some way. And it's quite interesting. You can ask a question on a Monday, and you'd get this kind of nod, and it'll be possibly no, and then you come back on a Wednesday having thought about it, and you ask the same question again. And again, you get the same nod, and this time, it's potentially yes. But you get a response, why did you not ask me this question earlier? So it's this confusion of left and right. But anyway, that's not important. This image there is a sort of cross-section, a full-scale cross-section. And it takes us 2 days. The guys in the workshop worked it out that it's much faster. It remains as an archive, a tool. We can all touch it. We can stand underneath. It's like that idea of blind men with, in front of this elephant holding the ear, the tail. And in some way, there's a dialogue. So, but what it does allow is this collective dialogue to occur between client, architect. Just between several different people with different viewpoints. But they can all kind of stand underneath this, this manifold and actually have a communication about, and each one has a particular viewpoint. And again, the idea is that where does it all meet? You talked about this idea of, building cities where all these million people bring their views in. But I do also feel that somewhere, man has an important role to play in this. Sure, we sort of give it to the machine where it can compute, and there's this whole algorithm that sort of constructs the answer. But I don't know if the answer is that straightforward and simple. I think for me, the answer lies somewhere more in the understanding of our self or sense of self. And so, yes, possibly it's this collective organization or this collection of different points of view, but somebody needs to make the decision. And to give that decision to the machine, I think, is a question that we need to ask ourselves more clearly. But anyway, it's not so much making a decision, because then at the end of the day, we still need to run that machine ourselves. So anyway, these are different methods of making, very quick, economical given the place that we work from, and could be economical here in Switzerland. And I'm going to run this test next day. I have a good friend of mine here sitting here, Rudy, and he doesn't know that yet. But we're going to do a test to demonstrate that it can also be done here in Europe. But we can talk about that maybe in a year from now, because we need the evidence. Just different tools. Again, that the system is not something that is an instructive process or one that dictates, that we can work within a system and outside a system where we can produce our own tools, our own methods of making, be it color. So when you think about the Renaissance period, they made their own colors. Giotto saw red in a particular way. Da Vinci's red was different. There was no one single red, There were different shades of red. And so the idea that we have, I think at the end of the day, when I'm talking about self-reliance, is that it enables us to be able to, at the end, fundamentally have our own self-expression. My red might differ from your red, but it's in that sharing of that particular nuance that I think where the magic lies. It's in the diversity of that. Just quickly, I call this postures in architecture. For me, it's important, and I only bring that up more from a point of view that methods of making could potentially be lost purely in the way that we take postures. Just like in terms of machinery, certain machineries go. The materials might exist, but if we don't take particular postures, and in this case, a lot of the work that is done is particularly done sitting on the haunches for hours, and I can't do that anymore. And I think a lot of people, in this room could potentially not do that. And it's not that we cannot do that anymore. We can reclaim that. It's just that it's been obscured just from the culture of our times. So I'm saying methods of making could potentially be lost purely in terms of the postures that we take. So anyways, another question that I'm putting out there. These are a few projects I'm just going to quickly run. There's a few minutes, and just to give you a sense of an atmosphere. That's a model. Instructions were given on the model itself as a tool that everyone could really understand. And then there's a full-scale mock-up with the same trees that you can kind of vaguely see. There's these sort of thin betel nut trees that have been used to construct a mock-up. Now, again, this can be done. I mean, I say this can be done at a bigger scale. We just, a couple of days ago, we're doing a project. These are smaller projects done several years ago. But 3-acre site, about 2,000 square meters, which is not a bad size. And again, full-scale hand drawings, making these sort of infrastructures. And there's an understanding between the group of people that are building it about the dialogue between all that, what's occurring, between digging the ground, the stone, the brick, the lime, the relationships. So in some way, you don't really even need a drawing. It's just this idea of fractals. There's a rhythm to it. There's a mathematical equation that constructs a certain geometry. And once we all collectively understand that, I think in that lies the magic. It's in a sense that if we all had to dance in this room, we'd find each other's rhythms and a collective rhythm within ourselves. And that itself is, in my view, a construction of architecture, because we're continuously making space and shifting space. So if you imagine that potential, I think for me, that really is what I understand as I wouldn't say technology, but a means that enables a certain construction. It's a certain technique. The understanding of technology is really technique. But anyway, I'm just going to run through these slides. Just dimensions of buildings that are based on what a person can carry. The proximity of materials on site or near the site. I think for me, it's also important to ask certain fundamental questions of what do we mean by speed? There's a great deception in speed.
Please welcome Richard Horton from London.
Thank you. Thank you, Christian.
The left and right.
Good morning. What a contrast. I'm going to throw you straight into a totally different situation. I hope you'll enjoy it. It's about a search for beauty. And my personal life, I suppose, has been about a search for beauty in material. And this is essentially a quest for reducing material. And I think that's the most important. I think you can see the slide. There are a few words on the right-hand side, which you'll see are important phrases for the architecture which you're going to see. For me, one of the most beautiful images as a young boy sailing, I was sailing before I studied architecture, and sailing boats like this, it's beauty. For me, it's nature. Nature is what we're given. We can't do more. We can't do anything but to work with nature. Here you see the most minimal materials and the maximum nature. And when I mean nature, I'm talking about sunlight, the reflection of sunlight on water, all of the beauty we're given. And for me, architecture is so diverse in that way. So we can therefore enjoy the boat, the building, the aircraft, all of the products that we produce as designers. Here's a house which I built on the harbor where you saw the boat. And I wanted to bring that feeling of transparency, the feeling of beauty of floating in light to the architecture. So avoiding heavy materials, just giving nature a chance. That's really what I want to show you today, giving nature a chance. This is the view from that house. How can you do anything but want to float in that space? And you notice there, the tree is about transparency. It's a framework that we view the nature beyond. So I see a tree like a yacht. It's a framework to give beauty to the nature beyond. The same with the Steg, the little walkway. The water is even more beautiful with the framework giving it light. Here's the view of the house from the harbor. Upper deck, it's like a boat, upper deck for the view, cabins on the lower level. but not for any other reason but to enjoy the beauty. This is the arrival point. So less material means to me driving a small car, a beautiful car, electric car. This one's not, but we have them in the office, electric car. It's to minimize material, and I love the beauty that we can achieve with the small scale in every aspect of technology. Here's a house I built very early on for my parents, which I'm now restoring, which has absolutely classical proportions, golden section, squares, everything included. The window proportions are golden section. It's a villa. It's like the Petit Trianon. It's 3 elements, 5 glazing elements, absolutely classic villa design. Same size as the Petit Trianon in plan, but with much less material that we can do today. We can use far less material. So I put the weight of everything. You saw the weight of the catamaran, you saw the weight of the building previously, the weight of the frame. I'm giving only the weight of the frame here. Even in the sculpture that I'm enjoying working with my daughter, Poppy, we enjoy the dialogue between giving a minimum material with maximum message and allowing the nature to coexist. Enjoying the materials that we have. Here's a house built entirely of aluminium components because it was to be built, self-built. So it's like the catamaran, using components from the catamaran. Fast build, 5 hours, 6 minutes, and 11 seconds to assemble the framework. And the weight you can see. I'm not going to repeat what's on the screen. I hope it's clear. So a beautiful project. The furniture that we make is, again, transparent, light, carbon on the right-hand side, aluminium on the left-hand side. Light because the family can live with it. It's not a weight. It's not a physical or intellectual weight. It's absolutely delicate, allowing the light to penetrate through it. The same with my teaching. This is a little object I built in England and took to Australia to teach with, to explain the beauty of nature as seen through the minimal architecture. I loved this image, and the students loved building it. And we enjoyed taking it around Australia to different places. A really delight, not to work with people and young people, and to the nature. I can't tell you how important, especially now when we're going into a time when we have to reduce. So reduction should be a fundamental element of our teaching in architecture. A famous project, this is the ETH Zurich in the 90s, very early 90s, when the student union there very kindly invited me to bring the little Swiss ski house to the university for a lecture. And we delivered it with the helicopter because it weighs 300 kilos empty and 700 kilos maximum. So that the beautiful helicopter can carry it up to 4,000 meters. We can't go more than 700 kilos. But here again, it's a device, it's a vehicle to enjoy beauty, nothing more. You don't have to say it's architecture. I don't care about architecture. I care about nature and the dialogue between man and nature. And if the vehicle helps us to enjoy nature, to me that's wonderful. So here it is landing on the Swiss-Italian ridge, where it's been for almost 10 years. And Rita and I are going this summer to try to, it's a bit buried now. We have to dig it out, I hope. So a beautiful little object, 300 kilos for sleeping 2 or 4 people. A shelter, a bivouac in German. But a dialogue. The relationship between, I showed you the helicopter and the building that comes from the helicopter. Don't be deceived about transportation. As human beings, we've always shared our transportation design and our architectural design. We may not think we're doing that, but we are. Just look at these two images. You see that transportation and habitation are totally dovetailed together. And if we're going to innovate, we have to look at transportation before we look at the architectural magazines. We have to. And this is what I teach a lot. If we go forward to perhaps the space journeys that are going to happen in the desert above America, about Western America, then we see a new kind of interior coming from the spacecraft, which we can learn from and bring to Earth with a delicate light architecture that could be, for example, an airport building in the future. The student project in Munich, most of the projects I'm showing you today are my students' designs, not my designs, but I work zu Tisch, absolute in love with the process of design with the students. So, habitation and transportation. We made a dream project. All of these projects are little dreams. But here especially, we made a wonderful project with the students to try to marry transportation, habitation for the future. And I'm talking about low carbon architecture, means also reduction in material to achieve that. Think about how much it weighs. It's 2,300 roughly kilograms, this little house. The car underneath is 900 kilograms. It's about nature. This is another vehicle for nature, purely and simply. It's not architecture. It doesn't matter, the word architecture. What I'm engaged in here is a deep love and affection for nature. And other cultures have given us that knowledge. Japanese architecture is about the relationship between the interior and the courtyard for the classic palaces. So here is a relationship. In the Japanese tea house, no chairs. In the microhome, no chairs. So the students in Japan, my team of students in Tokyo, the TIT Tokyo, my team of students in Munich, could work on with the same disciplines. About 200 students were involved, and many assistants involved in Japan and in Germany and Munich on the development of this tiny micro compact house. The interior is inspired by aviation, by the high quality we achieve in the small scale now. We know how to make really beautiful interiors with tiny, tiny elements. And this is missing from a lot of architectural education today, which I feel deeply sad about, with the result that we make a mistake about the scale of buildings. We build buildings in concrete on the mountains with ceilings that are far too high, that make the feeling uncomfortable when you're there. So the question of scale I'm talking about as well. We don't need big ceiling heights to enjoy nature or to be energy efficient. So let's think hard about what we're building. We're building too much volume, in my opinion. So if you think this is extreme, it's just to challenge your thought process about, we are inspired by the crew cabin. People live in this thing. To go from, you get in a flight from here to Los Angeles, the crew, half of the crew are sleeping or partying or whatever they're doing in the crew cabin in an A340. Remember that. All over the world there are people living in those conditions. Of course, in the Navy as well, and ships, the same. Here's the microhome in production at the factory in Austria, preparing to build a student village in Munich. Here's delivery of the village. On 2 trucks, we delivered a village of 7 houses, delivered with a crane over the trees so we don't disturb the landscape. The houses arrive shrink-wrapped, protected, and you get your house and you cut it and peel away the cover, and you have your equivalent to the Bang & Olufsen or the whatever it is you like, your Geneva sound system. You know what I mean. The house is the Geneva sound system. It's an espresso machine. It's the house as a micro-cultural, a new culture. Can we exist in a new culture? So I'm living in the little one that's raised up a bit, and here's one of the students enjoying a summer's day in the park on the Englischer Garden in Munich. So here's a little model which shows you how the car can engage underneath the microhome. And theoretically, they can exchange energy between one another. Here's my Swiss smart car driving from Zurich to Munich, and I park under the house and go into my little house. But this, I'd love to be able to say I could switch energy between the two, electrical energy, but that's to come. The interior is full of delicious little things, beautifully designed Swiss products, and goodness knows what. Wonderful products. There's a light from Bechtentschweiler in Zurich. Beautiful product, really beautiful, but tiny. No bigger than this, you know. Wonderful chance. Don't buy the big, stupid light. Keep it down to scale. That's modern. Here's my workplace where I prepared this lecture yesterday in Zurich. You can see the parallel here between habitation and transportation. I've exaggerated it by putting a little red book and what have you. But I think you get the message. The pilot has his warning, you know, and I have my little red book. Swiss products, LED lighting, the whole house uses 80 watts, you know, of energy for all the lighting, 20 light fittings, 80 watts. I won't go into energy totally, but here you see the fit between the modern product like this and the house. Suddenly there's a fit. It's not something floating around in a ridiculous space. It's suddenly relevant. The product becomes relevant. A project for Larks, for Retta Gürtner. We didn't realize this yet. I hope we will do one day. Little solar-celled microhomes for young snowboarders wanting to get into the mountains. Here's the house in Zurich. I showed you the interior just now at Erlenbach in Zurich. You're welcome to visit. And it's a beautiful place. Nature, it's a vehicle for nature. For me, architecture is nothing more than that. Just a vehicle. And this is the view from the little window. Can you have more beauty than that? Do you need a bigger tree? Do you think a bigger house gives you more relationship with nature? No, it's the opposite. You feel intimate. From the sailing boat, now we row, Rita and I row on boats on Lake Zurich, little tiny boats this wide, weighing 14 kilos. And we row to Zurich from Erlenbach. You know, it's a beautiful exercise. It's not to do with having a big boat. It's nothing to do with that. The nature is more present when the boat is tiny. And here's a view of Werner Blaser and Christian visiting the site. And I'd love to say it's wonderful that you're here, Werner. Absolutely wonderful to see you here. And thank you, Christian, for the chance. Proportion is here, just like the first house I showed you in 1971, the courtyard house. This is the same classic golden section proportions. It doesn't mean, you know, you do need to be aware of all our culture. And I'm going to show you a little house we flew to. I don't know if we can. Here we are. I'll leave this. This is the little house being delivered to Brissago, to a site, very steep site in Brissago. And a client from Munich has the land, and he couldn't build, he couldn't get access, so he needed to, we had to deliver with a helicopter. So here we're delivering 2,200 kilos with a helicopter. eventually they get it into place. It took 4 minutes from the lakeside where the truck was parked to fitting the house. Precision helicopter engineers, absolutely beautiful precision building. Now, don't think I'm in love with technology. I love nature. And this is a vehicle for nature. And it looks like a windy hurricane, and it was, but nothing was damaged. It was all survived. I'm going on, because then we took the microhome to Museum of Modern Art, actually in 2008, and imagine the students' project going to the Museum of Modern Art in New York. I'm so proud of that project, because they could enjoy that. They could come with us and see that. There's more to the microhome. There's the question of urban living with a microhome. And I just show you a plan here. There's the question of population. Europe, even at between 0 and 1% growth, we're growing Europe by 1 million people a year. Okay, it's in that region. So think hard about that. Think hard what you're doing if you build a big building. Is that really what we need? Do we need big offices anymore? Do we need high ceilings? We can't. We can't afford the material, in my opinion. Okay, a bit extreme, I know, but I'm challenging you for that. Here's a little cluster of group of 4, which you can make bigger. Again, the microhome is tucked in. I'm going very fast. In London, we're building an interesting, we're just finishing this project, covered in solar cells, low carbon timber construction. The solar cells produce about 20% of the energy of the house, even in London. Even in London. So the engineers tell me. I'm waiting for the reality to happen, but there we go. There's some nice comparisons between the energy used by an Airbus A380 and a smart car. And you'll see Kingsgate House, the building you're looking at with the solar cells, is the gray image in between. 260 kilowatt hours a day, the same as a smart car. Okay? The whole building with 43 apartments uses the same energy as a smart car, driving 24 hours. We're building this now in Canary Wharf, but again, this is about lightness. 6,600 kilograms doesn't sound light, but for a building of 226 meters high and an aspect ratio of 1:15, it's extremely efficient structure. It's a Bucky Fuller structure. Here it is, the mock-up under construction, and we're just beginning the site work for this 575 apartments, some of which are very tiny apartments. Just a tester for Basel. This is a scheme my students did for the Dreiländereck Eck in an expo project. Some of the statistics for that. I'm finishing on this one. I'm sorry if I exceeded it by a little bit, but I hope it's okay. And think about building a lightweight building on the Dreiländereck Eck. Only 600,000 tons. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. All good things are 3. We go on to the last presentation from the Bjarke Ingels group. BIG is invited because I think they are influenced from the multicultural exchange, global economical flows, and advanced communication technologies that lead to different attitudes towards design and construction, at least different than the previous 2 attitudes. I feel something new is moving into fields that have not been explored by architecture yet. I call big works is social tech, since they explore the effects of size and the balance of programmatic mixtures in the aspects of social, economic, and ecological outcome. Big grew up to 160 architects, and they are based in Copenhagen, New York, and other places in the world. Bjarke Ingels himself confirmed to be here today, but had to cancel this in last minute. But I'm very happy that Jakob Lange, as one of his 6 partners, is here today for this lecture. Jakob earned an architecture degree at the Royal Academy of Arts, the School of Architecture in Copenhagen. He collaborates with Bjarke since 2003, since 11 years, and has been a project leader for several and big, largest prize-winning and award-winning projects, such as the Mountain in Copenhagen and the Tallinn Town Hall in Estonia, which will be completed this year. We are excited to hear the third attitude from BIC. Please welcome Jakob Lange. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I have quite a lot of slides to cover, so I better get started. We as architects has to become designers of ecosystems, not only buildings and expressive sculptures and expressive sort of landmarks, but also designers of ecosystems that channel not only the flow of people, but also the flow of energy and resources throughout our cities and our buildings. This image is taken at the COP15 in Copenhagen, and as you might be able to detect from this image, the atmosphere was not very good. It was actually a complete failure. None of the goals that were set out was met, and the entire sort of discussion about being sustainable was drowning in this misconception that being sustainable has to do with sacrificing parts of your life that you enjoy, so taking shorter showers or driving less in your beautiful car and so on. At BIC, we are very interested in this notion of what we call sustainable hedonistic sustainability, that you should be able to take longer showers and you should be able to drive more in your car. So in 2010, we were asked to, or we won the competition to design the Danish pavilion at the World Expo in Shanghai. And as the theme was livable cities, or sustainable cities, we wanted to show how we in Denmark sort of think and work with this idea of sustainable or hedonistic sustainability. This is an image from China a few years back where sort of one of the main transportation means was the bike. Today, people are stuck in traffic for up to weeks. So we wanted to sort of reintroduce the idea of the bike. So we brought 1,000 bike to the Danish pavilion at the World Expo. And here you could basically both walk around the exhibition that showed about Danish life, but you could also take the Danish city bike, which is for free in Copenhagen, and drive around to see how it is to live in Denmark. In the center of the pavilion, we brought some harbor water from the Copenhagen harbor. One of our first projects was the harbor bath that we did because a few years back, the politicians decided to move the industrial neighborhood out of town and started to clean up the harbor. So now this is sort of one of the most popular spots in Copenhagen in the summertime, right next to where you work. So this is essentially the idea behind hedonistic sustainability, that you can create these kind of these kind of great moments right in your own neighborhood. So the Copenhagen harbor water was shipped to the center of the Danish pavilion, where you could borrow a pair of red and white bathing shorts and take a swim with the Little Mermaid. The Little Mermaid is sort of the national symbol of Denmark, but it's also one of the 3 fairy tales taught in the Chinese curriculum. so they know the story by heart, every Chinese kid. So with a lot of persuasion, we even had to go to Parliament to speak the case for making the Little Mermaid travel. We got her out of the country, shipped her to China. We even got her through Chinese customs and into sort of the heart of the pavilion, where she was located for half a year, showing off or helping to show a sort of a very important part of Danish culture. Yes. Then I'm gonna move on to sort of three of our projects that have meant quite a big deal to us. We call it the Ørsted Trilogy. We started out by doing the V&M houses that you see here, which is basically 270 apartments in these two buildings. The two buildings are named after the shape of the building when you see it from top, but they are basically made in such a way that they create a view from inside of the apartment. I think I have a pointer here. So even the people living in this place have a great view of the surroundings in this out here, and the same goes in the other direction. So the V&M house are shaped a little bit differently. The V house has these very pointy balconies, and the M house is more like a three-dimensional Tetris game where the apartments sort of interlock in each other. The exterior is kept very minimal, and the buildings have been built for half of average construction cost in Copenhagen at the time. The next project, which is the second in this trilogy, is the Mountain, built for the same client on the site right next to. When the V&M house was put into sale, 90% of them were sold in 1 week. So the client bought the neighboring site where, according to the local plan, you had to put 2/3 of parking, and 1/3 of housing. The site is 8,000 square meters in total. And as you can see, if you start placing the parking and the houses, you never end up with a good result. But we decided to sort of combine the two sort of ingredients and use the parking as a foundation, following the height regulations of the site itself. And then we would sort of shape the buildings to allow for this view from the M house especially, and also to orient the M house habitants towards south. The parking house was built up almost like a mountain slope, where you can do the sort of serpentine turns all the way to the top. And then again, covered in this 2,200 square meters facade that I'll get back to. On top of that, we laid out a 10 by 10 meter grid. And essentially, it became this sort of almost like a terraced building placed on top of the parking. The parking itself is owned by the municipality. And our client basically decided or offered to build this and then get in return the splendors of having 80 apartments, all with a fantastic view of the surroundings. The parking house itself is covered in this aluminum facade. This is an image of the Mount Everest Massif. And when you are up close inside the parking house, because the parking house needed to be naturally ventilated, we had to have a very perforated facade. But up close, you can find yourself behind sort of a glacier or a pile of rocks or something. But then when you move away from the building itself, it becomes the biggest black and white photo in the world. At nighttime, the colors from inside the parking house starts to sort of seep out through the building exterior, and you can sort of start getting a glimpse of the structure behind. The structure, since it's a terraced house, and you would otherwise need 10 vertical lifts to get up to each floor, in the project we imported a Swiss lift that is used when you build on mountain slopes, of course. And this basically takes you to all of the different floors in the entire complex. So it takes you up from the bottom, where the ceiling is colored grass green, all the way to the top, where you have a sky blue color. And then you enter into the corridors, which, when you are in this universe, you only find yourself in this one color. Because what we noticed was that when we built the V&M house, was that kids were not navigating by floor. They were not saying, I live on the 3rd floor or the 4th floor. They were saying, I live on the green corridor, or I live on the red corridor. So we took this thought with us to the mountain. And when you then step through the door, you step into a sort of almost like a parallel universe, where all surfaces are covered in wood and white-painted concrete. And you look out into your beautiful garden, where all the sort of the railings has been dimensioned so that you don't look straight down to your downstairs neighbor. And then in the railings, we have planted more than 20 different types of wines that all are blossoming at different times. So they have been arranged in these big patterns. So like a real mountain, the building itself is alive throughout the year. And the roofscape itself, because it has quite a big footprint, is collecting all the rainwater that falls on the building itself, and it's used for dry seasons, then pumped back onto the system to water the greeneries. So when you cross the canal to the neighboring sort of neighborhood, it's almost like one of these, or a few of these small houses has jumped the canal and is then stacked all the way up to the 10th floor. Further out in the Ørsted, we have the 3rd project. The mountain and VM house are here. This is downtown Copenhagen. The 8 house, and this was a part of the master plan. When the financial crisis hit, our client was one of the only ones brave enough to continue building the project, and lucky for him, because he was the only one shooting out apartments at that time. So he was selling quite good when they finally was finished. So they're lying all the way to the border of sort of a listed area where you have sort of nature coming very close to you. It's an extremely big building. It's 200 meters wide and 90 meters, 200 meters long and 90 meters wide. And what you then normally would start doing is to stack sort of the different programs next to each other like you do in a normal city. But in this case, we sort of turned it a little bit upside down, like the mountain, combining the functions, using the sort of the offices at the bottom and then having houses on top. Then we twisted the building at the middle to create sort of an access point and pulling down the corner towards south to let light come into the courtyard, and raise the northern corner to allow or to give daylight to the apartments in that area. So here's a typical section of the building that, because offices require more depth, houses on top, we have a layer of row houses that then have access directly from the roof of the offices. Then on top, we have more traditional apartments, and then finally, these penthouse row houses. So you very clearly see this division of program in the building when you approach. This is a view from the street at the top that is basically allowing you to go from ground floor all the way up along the building down to the ground floor. And I have this little video of some of my former colleagues visiting the site. And as you can see from this little street, you can basically access all of the apartments in the entire complex. All elevators has been dimensioned so that the mailman can take his mail bike up through the elevator and then slowly bike his way down. Each of the small apartments or houses have their own little garden with a fruit tree outside. This is taken a few years back, so the trees are already much larger, and you have sort of apple, pears, and cherries in the summertime. So now we are back down where you have a cafe in the southern corner of the building. This is one of sort of the cuts throughout the building out from the 8 house. then of course, because I'm here, I'm showing one of our projects. The project leader, Jakob Henke, is also here with me. And it's a project located in the old Transit Lager building. We of course started out by sort of maximizing the building envelope and looking at how much would it actually take to sort of maximize the amount of square meters in the project. So we have this sort of layer of houses on top of the old construction. And then to further optimize views and so on, we sort of cut the building into 5 small towers that we then rotated to give more daylight into the building itself. So it's almost like these small twisted squares. And since the building is sort of an old warehouse building, the structure itself is so tough that we can easily place these buildings on top. And then finally, we sort of adapted the entire housing thing on the top to fit the building needs. So we really sort of have strived to maximize daylight impact on the building itself. And that, of course, also allows us to place these small gardens in the corners. In all of the corners apartments, you have a fantastic view of Basel when we go up. And then what's peeking sort of inside, if we just take here, right there, this little triangle allows daylight to sort of penetrate into the lower industrial building and apartments underneath. And we then plant a lot of vegetation here. So from the inside of the apartments, you have a very close proximity to the green in the neighborhood. But also the roofscape becomes a public roof terrace for the residents of the building itself, down to the gardens in front of the houses on top of the old construction, and again down at level 0. I'm going really fast. I have 600 slides, so the final 2 projects that I want to show is our Maritime Museum that just opened, 4 months ago. It's located right next to Kronborg, which is the castle of Hamlet, in an old dry dock. And in the competition, this is where sort of the Danish Pride fleet was constructed. And in the competition brief, we had to place our museum inside the dock and make a spectacular project out of it that could be seen, but we could not stick out of the ground. So there was kind of a dilemma there. And when we started out by filling all the program inside the old dock, we found out that we're going to basically cover everything more or less and only have these tiny skylights. So instead, we suggested to keep the old dock as it is and placing the program on the periphery outside, peeking into the old dock itself, creating these small bridges that would allow for shortcuts throughout the building itself. And here's sort of a little flyover of the museum as it is today. This is the main entrance to the Hamlet Castle, which is a UNESCO heritage. And basically, you take one of the bridges that you see here down into the museum itself, that sort of ricochets from the other edge into the museum itself. So from the old dry dock, which is kept completely open, only with a few openings into the museum itself, you sort of have a sort of spectacular views of the meeting or the contrast between the old dry dock and these new sort of floating shortcuts. In the center of the pavilion, we have the auditorium, which is almost like this butterfly construction itself, that allows, in a very sort of ingenious way, to hold the stage in place. And here you see the Hamlet Castle in the background. And then the final project that I'm going to show in 2 minutes is one of our projects that we call social infrastructure. A few years back, I think 3 or 4 years back, there was a competition to do a new waste-to-energy plant in Copenhagen. And in Denmark, we landfill 4%. We recycle 42%, and the rest is burned into heating and electricity. So it's the greater Copenhagen area that is using this area. It's located right in downtown, out here by the harbor. And the director of the power plant wanted to give something back to the city itself, so that it's not only trash going her way. If you look at trash as an energy source, one bag of household trash equals 4 hours of light or electricity and 5 hours of heating. And sort of translated, that is 1 ton of trash equals almost 2 barrels of oil. So it's a very, very good business, and this is what these kind of buildings looks like traditionally. It's located right next to sort of a very active area, an old marina, where you can sort of go-kart and some water skiing facilities. And speaking about water skiing, Copenhagen has happily traveled for many hours to go skiing. Denmark is flat as a pancake. So we go to Sweden to ski instead because we have no mountains. We have mountains of trash. So we decided to sort of import a power plant or import a Swedish ski resort to cover the entire power plant in sort of an exterior surface. And we shaped the power plant itself into a mountain slope that would give you access from the roof on a green, blue, or a black slope. You take the elevator in the highest corner. On top of this very sophisticated and very expensive, this is going to be the most energy efficient power plant in the world. And in summer times, we can go skiing on artificial grass. And in wintertime, of course, we can ski on real snow. So in a few years, you better watch out for Danish skiers in the Olympics. So, of course, this becomes a very sort of a green and leisure park that Copenhageners can travel to in the future. And the facade itself is also this green lung. I'm skipping fast here. That helps ventilate or cool down the area because of sort of evaporative cooling in the plants itself outside the windows. So essentially, it becomes a bigger loop connected to Copenhagen itself. And as a final note, the chimney, we are collecting the smoke. And then every time Copenhagen has burned 100 tons of CO2, this mechanism blows a giant smoke ring. And not only is this, of course, a very cool feature, but it's also about knowledge. Because if you don't know, then you cannot act. And by informing people of Copenhagen about that now there's another smoke ring, then you know that Copenhagen has just emitted another 100 tons of CO2. So if you don't know, then you cannot change. So by this, we hope to sort of change the attitude towards pollution. Thank you.
Great. Great, thank you very much, Jakob. Now we have heard 3 very interesting positions. Now we come to a discussion. And I want to thank Judith Scholt. She holds a degree in mathematics and architecture and is the chief editor of Tech 21. And she will be moderating. Please come all onto the panel. And we maybe take 5 minutes more, but have a good discussion. Thank you.
Well, good morning or good noon, everyone. I also hope we'll have a good discussion. I think I have a really, really hard job today to find a synthesis about all this fulminant shows, because we have really different approaches here. I will try. One thing that I realized when I was listening to those lectures was that actually there's one common thing. The common thing is that you all, in different kinds of ways, try to use technology to get back to nature, actually. Of course, there are differences because it's different technologies. It's also different aspects of nature. But what we finally try to do is commute with nature again. So just leave the building behind us and come back to ourselves or our nature, our environment. And I think that may be a point to start the discussion. And I also tried, but that will be a big, a big jump, this question of transportation. So we heard, Bijoy Jain told us, or showed us also very impressive pictures about people carrying parts of the building, and so that's the minimal module that you can transport, so you have to build with this material. That's what you can use. And on the other end of so the other extreme was Richard Horden with the helicopter transportation. Do you see any common things between your approaches?
I think we both love nature, first of all. I think we all do. And it's, for me, it's bringing that to the front of the architectural debate again. It was at the beginning of the modern movement. You know, Mies, and they were all engaged, and Frank Lloyd Wright, in making buildings part of nature or enjoying nature. So I don't think it's new, this. It's just we've forgotten a bit. We get so obsessed by putting lipstick on the outside of buildings. We forget actually what is important.
So the important thing is not the building, but
our relationship with the world, our relationship with nature. We don't have more. We can't create more nature. We can grow on building buildings and buildings and buildings, but we have to learn how to live. If we're growing at a population of 1 million more in Europe, you know, we have to find a way to keep nature in the city, keep nature, bring nature into the city, which you were suggesting good ideas. That's I said enough, I think. Mm-hmm.
I would agree and disagree. My view is that I am nature. That we are nature.
So the building has to fit you.
That I am the building. The way I look at it is that, and that's why I brought that into play, this understanding of Greenwich Mean Time and the sun and the moon. And yes, the common thing is transportation, because you asked what was the common thing, and I said transportation. I only say this, is that once we truly understand this idea that I am nature, or we are nature, then the conflict, or this idea that there is little of nature, that will cease to exist. I'm saying there's an abundance of nature, but that lies within us and what's outside us. That's, in my view, that's our choice.
I'm not sure that I understand, but maybe we find the position between those two extremes.
More than 70% water. Our entire physical attribute consists of more water.
Yes, that's true, but I'm not sure we are all so beautiful to look at, like the garden in Mr. Horden's.
I think so. I completely believe that every single one of us sitting here in the room is equally and as beautiful as what's outside there. It's just the question of perception, that's it. And prejudice, I think.
Yes, I think that's... that's quite a different point of view, because well, you have to correct me if I say
hence I said wrong. I agree and disagree. And that I do understand Richard's point of view. And I just want to clarify, not so much the exclusion of us, but the inclusion of us in that larger picture. And hence I say there's actually, we live in abundance. It's a question of what we want to do with it. And I think that's the same question that he's concerned with, if I might say so.
Yes, the question is how we include ourselves in this big picture.
We are the big picture.
Big. This question of nature, I think in your buildings, the ones you shown last, it was also kind of wrapping nature around an existing technology.
Yes. I think we are extremely interested in the technology that nature offers. So, for example, the wrapping of the power plant. By planting all these small plants, the water in the leaves, when the sun hits that, it creates what's called evaporative cooling, which helps cool down the environment inside the building itself, so that we need less power to basically cool down the building itself. Because it is a power plant, it does produce a lot of extra heat, so we also need to cool it down. But by using sort of the technology that the plants are offering us, and this, I think a lot of, we have just begun to sort of scrape the surface of the possibilities that nature maybe can offer us. But you could say that maybe this sort of evaporative cooling is one of the most sort of ingenious ways of actually using nature as a benefit to our buildings.
So actually, it's kind of a low-tech code on a high-tech device.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Ludger Hoverstadt, you were talking about the disappearing of technique, because everything is getting smaller, it's getting little tiny chips, you can't even find them, you don't know where they are built into, you have wireless technology, you have very efficient building technologies, so the technology disappears in another way than in your example. So what remains?
So what I would say is it's a little delicate with our relation to nature. I would say we are intellectual beings. So therefore our attitude towards nature is an intellectual, cultural artifact. So it's a certain concept we are thinking in. And this kind of nature, I would say, to provoke this discussion, we are dreaming of is we left that around 1900. So with quantum physics, with electricity, with information technology. Things just go like that. So that's the incredible thing. So we left that, and I think what we are currently seeing, with all these three examples is symbolization of nature. It's not nature. So it's an intellectual artifact and contracting natures, different stories about what we are dreaming about that and so on. And what we've really had in the last 120 years, I think that's amazing, and we always forget that because we are struggling with resources and focusing on sustainability and these kind of things, is that the first thing is everybody on this planet got a double life. So in 1900, average life expectancy in our countries was, in Western countries, was 49 years. Now the world population average is far beyond 60. So we got 30 years extra within 2 or 3 generations. I think there's no cultural context how to deal with that, with this amount of extra life. That's beautiful. And this is because of contracting nature, because of symbolization of nature. And the second is, I think if we'll calculate positively, then in 1900, about 100 million people had been literate, not more. Now it's 6,000 million, 60 times more. We have a population, some 6 to 8 times more, but literacy is 60 times more. So we have people who get extremely old, and they all read, and they connect it. And not with electricity, that's sad, but with information technology, they all have mobile phones. So we have 7 billion mobile phones on this planet. That's incredible. And they all can read. And they all get double life. All this is extra nature. And this is product of our intellect. And that, I think, it's very important to see that by all this complaining about scarcities, about necessities, about optimizations, and so on. What we've seen is different stories of symbolization of nature. So we are contracting nature. So we are not part of nature. We are not nature. We are contracting nature and try to be polite to it.
Well, being polite is one thing, but I mean, still we have also a double life in another sense, because we are intellectual beings, that's true, but we are also physical beings, so we really need a chair to sit on. And we also need a building.
I'd like to interrupt.
Yes, I thought so, please.
Yeah. If you notice, everything is about take, what's on offer. The plant offers, everything is offering us. Question is, what are we giving back? And if you claim that we're intellectual human beings and that we're the elite in the given construct of nature, right, then I think we need to re-ask the question, because given that we've doubled our lives, right, we should actually be in what, quote unquote, be living in a sustainable world. The question is, we're not, right? What I want to say here is that it requires our physicality to engage once again. And that's why I'm saying hand, mind, and body.
That's always.
Right? But hand being an extension, or the machine being an extension of the hand. I'm saying that they're one and the same thing. Whether it's a big truck or whether it's the hand. It's a question of how you negotiate the machine, right? Because I think somewhere academia has a position of power, right? And there's another word that's come up a lot in this discussion, and it's the idea of spectacle, spectacular. Right? Is culture about spectacle and the spectacular? And I think, for me, the interest is in asking these very fundamental questions. I truly believe we are nature. We are nothing more than that. We cannot extricate our responsibility from this very fundamental relationship. And that's what we want to do, is continuously give it away to a machine.
But I think, could I interrupt there too?
Sure.
Because I agree with a lot of what you said. But actually, we have to learn how to consume less. This whole exhibition is about consuming as much as possible, because everybody wants to sell as much as they can. And this is the dilemma. It's the dilemma of, just like that you talked about, the dichotomy in the computer, which doesn't allow people to think. It just lets them work. It doesn't let them think. And I think the problem is we have to try to change the machine. We're going bigger and bigger. And for me, there's not enough study. Of course, you've seen this in my talk, but there's not enough study on less consumption. How do we reduce consumption? I'm not talking about India. I'm talking about Europe and America and China.
I think it's important. It's important. You can't displace India out of the conversation to say that I'm talking about Europe and the rest of the Western world. Yeah. That's been the problem all along. And that's why I'm trying to say that that's the problem with Greenwich Mean Time. The discussion has to be brought in. How do you deal with a more
this is fundamental
complex
misunderstanding. This was, you see, the loss of a structure. So it's not about resources. Computers are not machines. They are abstract machines. And therefore, computers are abstract bodies of thinking. And they allow us to make these kind of symbolizations. We see minimalizing of material, symbolizing of nature, and making less and more. This is just because of this symbolization. And computers are without matter. They don't need any matter. So it's just this. It's nothing more. That's the important thing.
So actually, you see computers as the extension of the hand and of the truck, and then the next step is the computer. So it's also just a machine that helps us.
It's an abstract machine, so it's the intellectual part of that.
Yes, but it's a machine working for us, on the intellectual level, not on the physical.
We are coexisting with that.
Yeah.
how has that been conceived? Who's given birth to it? Let's establish that first. It hasn't just fallen from the sky. How has this idea been conceived, this abstract idea that you're talking about, which is given to the computer, been conceived?
In mathematics.
And the
thinking.
Realization of the existence of mathematics.
This is what we realized in technology and developed in technology in the 20th century. This is what I see, that we are losing structure. So we are substituting any kind of physical machinery by symbolic elements without matter.
I think the problem is to make sure the computer doesn't just allow our human machine to just constantly go faster. You said it. We can do this very fast and so on.
But this
I mean, if we're building cities so fast, is that a good thing? I'm saying
of course not.
We must stop. We must think, what are we teaching in architecture schools?
Yeah. Thinking.
What are we teaching? Yeah. Thinking is more important than the computer.
Yeah. No, but the computer is a device of thinking.
No,
so,
it's not
so
yet.
the attribute
It's
of
not yet.
speed is a machinic attribute.
And it's not yet true. We have a great problem in the office that the people who work on the computers have stopped thinking. And this is a great problem.
But they're not the good ones.
Shouldn't be the case. Shouldn't be the case, but it is, unfortunately.
I think for me, what I'm hoping, or I'm thinking, what I'd like to teach really in school is care.
Of course.
That's fundamental.
Yeah.
Right.
This is what I would call contracting. Contracting.
Really?
Yeah.
Care is care.
Let's put it out to the audience. That is care and contract the same thing? I'm not so sure.
Should we answer questions? There must be maybe some questions. Would you?
Well, I think we are in the middle of the question, but maybe we have two positions here that we just cannot clear in the few minutes that we have. So I suggest that we try to make the question a little bit larger and talk about one point that you mentioned, which was what is our relation to nature? Do we look at it with the help of the technology? I mean, very small frames for the windows, for example, so that we think that we are near because we can see it very well, or are we near to nature because we have this this amazing smoke ring that is giving us information about what we are doing to nature just at this moment, or are we trying to really be in there? I mean, to build structures that have their weight, that we feel that they have their weight. We also have a weight, so that have a physical, not only appearance, but a physical presence that tries to commute with our physical presence. Of course, also intellectually, but not only. And what's the role of technology in this kind of building? That's what would interest me, and I have the microphone, so I just I just take the chance to ask you this question, please.
Yeah, I think maybe a hammer is a tool, and the chisels that you use to carve out the holes in the stone is a very primitive tool. As well as I think the computer is a tool to help us achieve the goals. And I totally agree, if we stop thinking because we're using tools that are too sophisticated for us, then we should maybe stop and rethink a little bit. But I don't see computers as or technology as something dangerous. I think it's a tool, just as the hammer and the chisel, that allows us to create or to create new creations. We are in a building with a very beautiful facade, and I think it will require a lot of man labor to draw it by hand. And I think the computer has probably allowed us to generate that facade in an hour, or half an hour, or 10 minutes, or 2 seconds.
It is handmade.
Yes, it's hand-built.
Yes.
But the planning of it, the tool that has been used to plan it has been helping us to do this much faster. So I think the different tools that we are using are allowing us to do different things.
So you don't judge the tools, but you judge the result. So the means why we use the tool.
Yes, of course we should be critical about the result always, and we should always use the tools that make sense. So if it makes sense to use a hammer and a chisel, I think that's what you should use. But I think I wouldn't use the hammer and chisel to carve out this facade out here.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, I agree that we should be critical about the result because. I mean, when I think of these fantastic micro homes that you make, I mean, they're really high tech, and in themselves, they may consume very minimal energy, and they are very small and use not much material. But if you think about it, that cannot be a model for the future. I mean, not.
There we are. You see,
not
immediately we get. I'm not surprised, and I'm always happy when people challenge that. But for me, it's really important that architecture schools try to reverse the tendency for big villas, for all over Zurich, all over Lake Zurich, all behind the hills, right over to Luzern. You know, getting bigger and bigger. You know, we can enjoy nature with less. We know this with the machine. We know this from the aircraft. Bill Lear built a small aircraft, and all the press said, you can't stand up in a Learjet. You know, it's ridiculous. Nobody will buy a Learjet. You can't stand up in it. You know, every aircraft before that, you could stand up. And suddenly, you know, we are. But I'm happy that the microhome is a little bit of a naughty challenge. You know, it's meant to be that.
Well, I think I didn't express my question clearly enough. I didn't mean that it couldn't be an example or the future of the villas. I think that the villa itself, either big or small, cannot be the model for humanity because it's also a very small part of humanity who can afford a small or a big house in a wonderful environment. So how, of course, single-family houses are very often experiments or prototyped to develop ideas, but how can you adapt this idea to a bigger scale? Because I don't mean bigger rooms, I mean more people.
I tried to show a diagram in the talk about urban micro-living. It will be very important in the future. We all would like to be in the center of the city for communication, for the cafe, for talking, for working, so on. But we don't have to be in the city, you know, all the time. You know, it's possible that we can design our life to be, you know, mobile. The microhome is a transitional home. Think of the young person leaving school and coming to London. I see this all the time. They come to London and they want to have an apartment. The only apartments that young people can afford in London are disgusting apartments, really disgusting conditions. Bad plumbing, bad windows you can't close or can't open. It's bad conditions. And people just want to make those new. And it's not an answer. It's really not an answer. For me, we have to rethink. It doesn't hurt to make a rethink on this topic, to allow young people in transition between earning money and earning very little, to be able to stay in small places and to optimize that in a way that would be very beautiful. Now, can we, by thinking intelligently, we can achieve that. And I believe we can achieve that. I'm sure, you know, it's just that I'm trying to suggest that we in Europe should be able to find new ways to live in the city, not just replicate the apartment of 50 square meters all over the place again and again and again. There are other ways to live, you know. We are free to invent those things. Technology is very rich, you know, the computer, everything, the technology from the stone to the aluminium. It's so rich, we should regard it as a fantastic palette of opportunity. But I just worry we're training architects to just produce more I call them garages for sofas. Do you know what I mean? They're literally empty during the day because they're all at work, and there's a sofa sitting there in a garage, you know. And it might be a nice garage designed by a good architect, but it's a garage for sofas. It's not integrating the furniture and the communication systems in a really instrument-like way. And the Swiss are wonderful at instruments. That's why we have the microhome in Switzerland. It's an instrument for living. And we should be not thinking anymore about building smart garages for sofas, but more about integrating all of these functions that we enjoy, we have the privilege to enjoy, in less, and be more mobile, be more sportive, be more mobile in ourselves, physically moving about. I think you see that in Switzerland. People are all over the mountains at the weekend. They can't wait to get out of the city. And you don't need to have a massive apartment if you enjoy that wonderful life, which you do here. So beautiful.
Well, I think the question is, where do you have the line, the border of the system? Because, I mean, a little, very beautiful, compact, perfectly designed home is very good if you have the view on the beautiful nature. But, I mean, you need the nature, you need a big road to get there. And
I showed the little tree to try and explain you don't need a big view. You don't need it. You need just a beautiful tree outside the little window. And you have, Japan knows this, you know. Tokyo lives like this. We can learn so much from that situation. And the microhome was born in Japan. You know, it was born in Japan and Europe. It's a fission object.
I agree on that, we can learn, but I still ask myself how far it can go.
Can I clarify on Richard's part, if you don't mind? No. I think one of the things that, you know, we are made up of 5 senses. We've all been talking about just one. What happened to the other 4? Mm-hmm. So I agree with what he's saying, that you don't need too much. I think the power or the truth of what we really can do is to engage those 5 senses in a complete way. And the problem of scale disappears. Because I can experience the universe through smell, through touch, through sight, you know, all the senses, that through sound. That's our true potential. And I think that's something that I understand when he's saying that it's about the idea of a footprint. That when all these 5 senses become part of a dialogue, of an inclusiveness, and it's not just the view that we're constantly talking about. It's all about the view, the view. What happened to the other 5? Which means, and that's why I said it's about prejudice then, that someone who's blind is then extricated from living in this world because there is no view. That's our perception that he or she does not have a view. But the truth of the matter is there's probably a deeper view than we can potentially even see, right? I'm just putting these things out there as sort of questions. I'm not in conflict with industry. I'm not in conflict with machine, with computer, with the hand. All I'm saying, and all I'm discussing here, it's the potential of their collective dialogue and their appropriate point in time when they are engaged. Just in the way that we engage our 5 senses. You know, the eye takes over, the sound comes in, and there's a system of priori that's fundamentally built into us, right? So for me, it's a non-issue about all the things in terms of the different modes or means of making. I'm saying that we actually put the collective resources of this erudite ability that man has into a collective dialogue, right? And to reconsider and it's not so much, you know, I'm saying let's also fundamentally re-examine that, let us empower ourselves in that potential. And that's why I said that we are nature, I am nature, because only once we come into an awareness that, yes, I truly am, we can truly do something about it. As long as that relationship is not in play it will always be something that's external to us, right? And somewhere the view is always external to us, but the other senses are more internal to us. Right? And I'm just saying that for me, it's, and all these wonderful things that are out there, all these devices, these things, whatever they might be, from the hammer to this microbe to the chip, that it's in the collective enterprise that we possibly can reclaim. And that's why I use the word past, present, future. The understanding that it's not about the future, it's about the now. And it's in the collection of all these three aspects of time that we then begin to actually conduct ourselves in a manner which is now. Because that's all we have. What happens tomorrow, nobody knows. What happens now is what matters.
Please.
I totally agree. The only thing is and this is always the thing. I think, again, for these about 100 years, we just left time and space as a reference. So there is no past, present, and future in conceptual thinking. So there is no territory as reference. So what I would say, as beautiful as your mini spaces are, and as a symbolization of a certain attitude, I think a principal alternative would be share beautiful places. So because you're out of time and space, so it's a question of property, of access to certain things, to public things, and so on. I totally agree with all these kind of, what I would say, symbolizations, but I disagree with the thing that we are embedded in nature, that we have to care for it, because this might puts us in the role of a master of nature. So we are caring for, we're setting us, if we say we don't know what it is, the hell, it's superb, it's differentiated, we don't have any other partner, we are contracting, and this is open what happens then, and we are responsible what we are doing with it. So we are not mastering nature, which is on technology, on infrastructures, on caring, and producing wealth for us and nature and so on. I totally disagree with the understanding that we are covered in time and space. We just stepped out of that. And that's a beautiful thing of our actual environment. And this is why we are able to symbolize and develop architecture on this symbolic level.
Yes, symbolic on the one hand, but on the other hand, I want to talk about your hedonistic attitude too, because I mean, hedonistic has, at least in Switzerland, almost just a little bit a negative touch. But actually, what you are trying to show here brings you quite near to your position, which means use all your senses, enjoy what you have, feel the moment, take a bath in the harbor. And that sounds very good, but then I ask myself, well, the industry has moved away. That's great for the guys who can take a bath in the harbor, but where has it gone to? I mean, is it not just shifting the problem somewhere else? Or do we really have the technology to keep this industry and be able to have a bath in the harbor?
I think it all has to do with sort of finding solutions to problems, so that we can sort of generate or create the cities that we want to live in. I think, of course, many people likes to live in small houses. I would also enjoy staying in, I like small spaces, but I also like bigger spaces. And people are very different in that sense. And the reason why I, in my presentation, said that, if we want to drive more in the car, then we have to find a solution so that we don't pollute as much if we want to drive more in that car. Or if we want to swim very close to where you live, then you have to find a solution. Of course, you can. The best solution in this case was not to renovate the power plants so that they would not emit anything. It would be to build some new power plants further up the harbor that would be state-of-the-art, and then turn all of the old industrial buildings into housing so that people would live next to the harbor so that they could take a swim whenever they liked. You know, so what I'm trying to say is that, you know, it's about figuring out or finding solutions to sort of solving the question about how do you want to live in our cities and buildings and so on.
So to use the technology to get back to your nature, whatever it may be in our different cultures. Ooh, I think that could stand for synthesis. I can't find a better one today, but I think we will all go home with a lot of inspiration, with a lot of thoughts, and I have learned a lot today, I hope. I hope you too. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you very much for these positions from the computer-generated megacity to the hand-built homes in India, to the micro-compact home, and to skiing or snowboarding on a trash-burning plant. I think this is a big document, what we heard today, and it reflects much of our time. And ich möchte sagen, dass diese Aufzeichnung auch auf dem Podcast, die dies nicht ganz verstanden haben oder in 10 Jahren noch mal hören wollen, www.swissbau.com und www.architekturdialoge.ch kann man das ansehen. Wie immer hat die Architekturbuchhandlung Schreiber ein paar Bücher in dieser Thematik aufgelegt. Wenn Sie lieb sind, können Sie es auch noch unterschreiben lassen von den Referenten. Ebenfalls sind Sie ja in Genuss gekommen von einem Gratis-Eintritt an die Swissbau. Können Sie mal schauen, diese Low-High- und Social-Tech-Welt hier. Sie sind also herzlich eingeladen, den Tag noch hier zu verbringen. Besonders möchte ich auch noch darauf hinweisen, in Zusammenhang mit dieser Lecture steht da vorne, wenn Sie rauskommen, rechts ein Überseekontainer, wo eine Ausstellung des Arch-Tec Labs zu finden ist, wo vor allem der innovative Neubau, der jetzt auf der ETH gebaut wird, ich glaube, Baubeginn ist dieses Frühjahr, vorgestellt wird. Also gehen Sie noch zu den Kollegen hier raus. Unsere nächste Veranstaltung von Architekturdialoge ist am 13., 20. und 27. Mai. In einem kleineren Rahmen, Architektur und, wie immer, mit einem Architekt und Nicht-Architekt in Diskussion, diesmal zum Thema Architektur und Glas. Und wer unser Newsletter noch nicht hat erhalten werden möchte, kann sich da auch noch einschreiben. Ich danke nochmal herzlich den Referenten, thanks a lot, auch der Moderation und den Sponsoren, dass wir das hier machen dürfen bei der Swissbau, Forster, Küchen und der HRS. Besten Dank für Ihr Interesse, für Ihr Kommen und wünsche Ihnen ein schönes Wochenende. Besten Dank. Thank you.